we're traveling the globe today, and we have with us today a roving reporter, Rani Singh, who's appeared on my show before, talking about her book on Sonia Gandhi. Today, interestingly, she's in Dhaka, Bangladesh, attending the 16th December Victory Day Parade ceremony in Bangladesh. Bangladesh, of course, is the new Asian emerging tiger, according to the U.S. Ambassador Dan Mozena. Rani Singh, welcome from Dhaka. How are you?
I'm really good, Dinesh.
Good to see you again. I haven't seen you in a while since we interviewed you on your book about
Yes.
Sonia Gandhi. So now you're in Dhaka. I'm very happy to
Yes.
learn you're in Bangladesh.
Yes, it's really exciting. Thanks, Dinesh. How are you?
Good, good. So so you're covering all kinds of interesting issues. You're going to tell us about what it is you're up to in Bangladesh.
I've never been so excited after visiting a country, not in a long time. Now, I'd like to tell you, first of all, that Dan Mozena, who's the US ambassador to Bangladesh, gave us an exclusive interview for Princeton TV. And I spoke to him a couple of days ago, and then by email, and then he kindly called me on the phone today and talked to me further. And he is really excited about US-Bangladesh relations. And he says that it's really important to the US. Why? Because in an effort to counter violent extremism and terrorism, the US-Bangladesh relationship is really important. So as Bangladesh deepens its ties to India, Nepal, Burma, China, that enhances, he says, regional stability, and that matters to the U.S.
Right. So this is part of this is something we've been talking about on this program regularly. It's part of the rebalancing that America is doing in the Asia Pacific. And of course, Bangladesh, as a secular democracy, a little bit of a background in terms of history on Bangladesh, of course, was founded in 1971 after the Indo-Pak War, which Indira Gandhi was very instrumental in. Mujibur Rahman, the first founder, Prime Minister of Bangladesh, was a leader at the time. And I, of course, remember growing up in India at the time, this history of the Indo-Pak War and how Bangladesh came into existence. And of course, India had a lot of refugees from Bangladesh at the time because of the war. So it was an everyday reality for us growing up in New Delhi. Now, of course, Bangladesh has transformed significantly as a secular democracy with I think the total population is about 160 million people, but a large majority of them are Muslim. So it's a story, in a way, as a counterpoint to the violence that's taking place across the border in Pakistan or Afghanistan. Bangladesh is almost a sanctuary in terms of democratic rule, civil society, women's rights, women's educational development, and of course the Prime Minister currently of Bangladesh is also a woman, Sheikh Hasina, whom I met at the UN Security Council meetings last month when she was here in New York, talking about climate change at the Asia Society. So, fill us in, Ronnie. I think the story is a fabulous one, and I think the interview that you got with the U.S. ambassador there is quite key and central to the narrative.
Yeah, he says that the U.S. Development Assistance Program is the largest in Asia, the one with Bangladesh, outside of Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Right.
The U.S. is putting in $200 million a year, he told me today. And that development program, it works in health. The U.S. is working with Bangladesh in reducing maternal mortality, under 5 mortality, and fertility rates to try and help bring them down. And then, President Obama's Feed the Future program.
Okay.
The U.S. is working very hard to increase agricultural production here in Bangladesh, improve families' livelihoods, help others prepare nutritious food for their families. And, of course, also key to this is the U.S.-Bangladesh military-to-military engagement to help with the maritime security. So the U.S.
We'll talk about that. I'm not as familiar with the maritime relations. What is U.S. doing in the Bay of Bengal, if you will, in terms of maintaining law and order?
So I questioned him quite closely. He said the U.S. Army, Navy, and Air Force is working with the Bangladeshi Army, Navy, and Coast Guards to help Bangladesh increase maritime security and protect against trafficking of people, arms, drugs, and work against terrorists. And interestingly, they're also helping to prepare for disasters like earthquakes, and they've also built or are rebuilding 547 cyclone shelters, and 116 more are to be built with American aid. And Dan Mazena reminded me that Bangladesh is the largest contributor to the UN International Peacekeeping Forces, with its policemen and, crucially and most impressively, police women.
I see.
They have, Dinesh, all women police units
In places like Afghanistan and parts of North Africa. Is that
in the UN International Peacekeeping Forces? And I've seen some of these women policemen, many of them on the road and sort of around us, and they are very impressive, really dynamic, very fit. And I wouldn't like to be arrested by them. But
now comparatively, when you compare India with Pakistan and Bangladesh, the comparison is invariably always made how strong women are, for instance, in Bangladesh, and also comparatively equally strong in India, but not necessarily across the border, let's say, in Afghanistan or Pakistan.
Yes. You know, this country has got an amazing record of women prime ministers. Sheikh Hasina, who's currently in power, has had a previous term, and in between there's been the current leader of the opposition has been in power, Khaleda Zia. So, and the current foreign minister is a woman. She's awesome, Dinesh. I've had a sit-down interview with her, and we had an intimate gathering here with her to question her, Dr. Deepu Moni. She really is one of the most impressive foreign ministers I've met anywhere in the world.
And she was quite active in Doha just last week at the COP18 climate change debate, where Bangladesh is taking a leading role, partly because it's a coastal lying country, and the loss of coastal land will have a significant impact on loss of crop and economic output. As a result, Bangladesh has been quite actively involved in lobbying the UN and other, developed countries for, stronger bill and enforcement on climate change. So Deepu Moni was there, quite actively involved in Doha, and of course, I'm sure she's at the other climate change discussions as well. So tell me, what is it culturally that's sort of central here, which suggests a very strong correlation between women having power, whether it's in the domestic sphere or in the political sphere, and then having a civil society, rule of law, and a functioning Islamic republic? I mean, not in the Constitution, I understand, but a population that's majority Islamic.
You know, that last bit, although obviously the majority population is Muslim, it's one of the most, if not the most liberal Muslim countries I've been to, because it's very low key. And Dr. Deepu Moni herself said to me that she is a practicing Muslim, but she keeps her religion private. And so you see women very, some conservatively dressed, but also some dressed in Western clothes. And certainly as a woman a non-Muslim woman moving around the place, I feel totally uninhibited. And I don't feel any of that kind of slight suffocation I sometimes feel in stricter countries. And of course there are Hindus and Buddhists and Christians here as well. And there's a whole amount of investment coming in, and many foreigners, particularly here in Dhaka, like Chinese are quite noticeable at the moment.
So talk about the, apparently the ambassador, U.S. ambassador said to you that Bangladesh is the new tiger?
He did. He's very excited and passionate about this country. He said categorically it could be the next Asian tiger. He pointed up the growth rate, which is, over 6%, and it keeps growing. Bangladesh has not had any negative growth in 40 years. It's never defaulted on payments. 57% of the population is under 25. I mean, these kind of things don't really get talked about. You compare 6.3, 6.5% growth rate, with what's happening in America or in Europe, less than half of that. And you can see why people are very interested and looking to Bangladesh right now, seventh largest country in the world, second largest exporter of ready-made garments and household textiles. Those are interesting figures.
And of course, they have a very strong and popular cricket team now.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Sport is very popular here. And you know, it's also there's a Bengali mindset, which is very studious. I think they have a very strong work ethic. You know, you find Bengalis at the top of universities, the top of industry. There's something about the Bengali mindset. You know, it's produced Nobel laureates. Many South Asian writers are Bengali, many of the most successful ones.
When you're talking about, of course, the founder of Grameen Bank, Muhammad Yunus Khan, right?
Yes, yes. Who's now running the Yunus Center. And, you know, what he's done and his legacy is phenomenal. People are doing some very interesting things. You know,
and of course, Amartya Sen, the Indian economist who you know, spent many years in England, of course, in the UK, also is Bengali or claims to be partly, you know, because I think he was born in pre-partition Bangladesh.
Yes, yes. I mean, at one time it was all one, you know, one big country. So the British decided to, in their wonderful way, do something about that.
Right, and of course, Rabindranath Tagore, the Nobel laureate poet, would also claim to be Bengali partly.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, in terms of the region that we're now talking about.
Yes, yeah, and my mother too says that she originally came from Bangladesh. She speaks fluent Bengali.
Okay, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah. So that's partly why I have an interest to really explore this country and kind of get back to my roots a little bit.
Right. So talk about, but you know, your earlier work on Sonia Gandhi and now Sheikh Hasina is yet another kind of a powerful woman figure heading up a large emerging democracy in Asia, who also comes from a political dynasty, if you will. Her father was the founder of Bangladesh. And then in 1975, there was a coup. And I think almost all of her family members were assassinated in this coup, except for the fact that her sister and her were traveling in Europe and then remained in exile as a result of it for many years.
That's right. I mean, it was a horrible thing to happen. And unlike Sonia, Sheikh Hasina had sort of politics in her DNA right from the start, because she grew up in that kind of political atmosphere. She didn't marry into it, so her credentials are really strong. And I'm finding she's quite demure and sort of laid back as a prime minister. The kind of things that are happening in this country, the women's empowerment and so on, there are sort of good, positive, constructive things that are being done. She heads up her party, the Awami League, heads up this grand alliance, and there are 2 or 3 other parties in there. Of course, you know, there are strikes here, there are allegations of corruption, as there are all over South Asia.
Right.
So
you have another kind of a news item that you found in terms of the Awami League's decision to abolish the caretaker government clause. So what is the news item on that you found out?
Well, you know, there's been some criticism in the British press when they quote her opponents, Hasina's opponents, as saying that it could be seen that the decision by the Supreme Court in Bangladesh to abolish the concept of a caretaker government is a way of kind of centralizing power. And I explored that while I was here, and I find that's absolutely not true. In fact, the reverse. When there have been caretaker governments in the past, that power has been abused, and people have used the idea of a caretaker government to impose emergency or frame new laws. And what the Awami League coalition is saying, that Grand Alliance is saying, is that, okay, the Supreme Court has abolished caretaker governments, but that doesn't mean we can't have dialogue. Let's have dialogue, opponents, and then whatever is the result of that dialogue, we will take it to Parliament and let Parliament frame the new laws. Let it all be done through due legal process. So that kind of blows that sort of concept of wanting to centralize power right out of the water. So I was really interested to find that out. And what the Awami League seems to be doing is kind of wanting to delete the footprint of military dictators who've ruled in the past.
Now that's the largest political party, right? That Sheikh Hasina heads up.
Yeah.
Okay. Now what's the other myth that you were talking about that you found to be not accurate on the ground in Dhaka?
Yeah. The trial of the war criminals. Those who were responsible, allegedly, or took part in massacres and terrible genocide. On a level, well, even worse than has happened in Rwanda.
In 75, we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
When the coup took place.
Yeah, through the years, the coup and also earlier on. So there have been trials of these sort of alleged perpetrators, and they were stopped in 2001. But the Hasina government would like to have the alleged war criminals. There are not many left of them, but there's one in Canada, there's one in Britain, brought to justice. But they're happy. Opponents again say that Sheikh Hasina is doing this to be vindictive towards political opponents, but the evidence proves otherwise, because what she's done is been totally laid back about it. When she came to power, she could have, if she was autocratic, organized summary trials and, exercised power in a way. But she actually said, and Dr. Deepu Moni repeated this, that Sheikh Hasina said, I do not want anything more than just an ordinary person would get. So she's been very laid back. She's allowed the thing to go through due legal process again. And the team over there, they know that the way Asian legal processes work in India, this could take years. This could in Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. This could take years and may never even come to fruition. But she hasn't sort of wielded power in any way. And also the people who are alleged to have committed crimes, they are being accorded full legal rights. They have a great defense team of their own. They have the right of appeal, and they're able to consult legal experts. And the UN was consulted by the Bangladeshi government, and they said that the Bangladeshi government is working to a very high international standard on this, and were quite supportive of it. So Deepu Moni said there is not going to be a victor's justice. There is no political vendetta, and yet, Sheikh Hasina, if anybody, has good reason to, with 18 members of her family killed. But I find that there is no, they're quite laid back about it, and they're prepared that, this may never see the light of day.
I see.
But let it go through the courts.
So what have you been able to find out from Deepu Moni or from others about the climate change debate, what Bangladesh, taking a very active role in lobbying UN and other bodies to have a stricter climate change bill passed through, because it impacts Bangladesh, Costa Rica, Maldives, and other countries that are coastal-lying countries?
Well, we actually met the Minister for Climate Change and his excellent team. We had a good briefing with them, and we were able to ask detailed questions. And they say that basically, Bangladesh's main energy resource is gas, which is clean. We have one of the most dense populations, but we don't have the kind of industry and pollution problem that the developed countries do have. We are not to blame. That's a big message coming out.
Right.
And those who are in the driving seat, Annex 1 countries, Europe, USA, Japan, Australia, they're the big polluters. And China and India, Brazil, and Argentina are also emerging close
Right.
behind.
Well, except that the developed countries say India and China, because of the population size now, and of course they're growing, are with the larger sort of carbon footprint. And of course, India and China sort of argue back and say, well, but you guys have been doing this for 200 years, through industrialization and development. Of course, Britain knows everything about that. As the country that introduced industrialization to the rest of the world. But of course, the coastal countries are sort of left out in the rain, if you will, because they have the most to lose, but they have kind of the least strongest voice in the debate.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Bangladesh has a lot to lose. It does suffer natural disasters, though it's working hard to counter that. But Bangladesh's message is very clear that they are working as hard as they can, and doing as much as they can. They're deeply engaged with the climate change issue, but they do feel that those in the driving seat are not acting well enough and hard enough at all. And there's a lot more that the developed nations can be doing, and they need to be taking the lead on that.
So I think this is sort of central. So you're saying that U.S. strategy in the Pacific or in Asia Pacific is in a way to kind of be a strong presence in Bangladesh as well.
Yes.
Alongside a country like Burma or Myanmar, where Aung San Suu Kyi has now been elected to the parliament, and potentially will be running for the premiership. Again, we don't know, it's speculative. And President Obama was just there right after his re-election. He, within 2 weeks, he made a trip to Asia Pacific. He went to Burma, Myanmar, he went to Thailand, he went to Cambodia, again to reassert the American sort of rebalancing or pivot strategy towards Asia. So you're saying Bangladesh is also part of that strategy?
Absolutely. I mean, I mentioned to you about the growth rate, which is really something quite remarkable. And there's a confidence here, quiet confidence. There are a large number of countries. Egypt is the biggest investor, and the USA comes in at number 2, in fact.
And then China, right?
China is actually outside the top 10.
Really? That's surprising. Okay.
Big investors, which is surprising if you look at the number of Chinese around. And the China-Bangladesh link is very, very close. Dr. Deepu Moni was quite vocal about
And then where's India in the scheme of things?
India is close. India hasn't really helped itself really by stalling on a couple of key treaties, the Land Agreement Treaty and the Teesta River Treaty. But India and Bangladesh have a very, very good and close relationship, and there's a strong personal relationship between the Hasina family and the Sonia Gandhi, bit of the Gandhi family as well.
So are you making news here by suggesting you're pursuing another biography of some sort, historical biography?
I'm looking at Bangladesh right now, Dinesh. Stop being a journalist. And,
all right. So tell me about some of the women's initiatives that you've been looking at on the ground in terms of development work.
I do, and I want to talk to you about that, and also when we talk to you about a really lovely project I found just today.
Sure.
I've met this amazing kind of dynamic character lady called Farhana Ahmed. She's the national coordinator for the White Ribbon Alliance for Safe Motherhood, which is a sort of campaigning platform that works to better the conditions for mothers and antenatal, prenatal, and all the issues to do with that, and also tries to holds governments and politicians to account. She highlighted to me the fact that Bangladesh has been praised in the UN for meeting Millennium Development Goals,
Right.
which are these targets that have been set, 3, 4, and 5. And Sheikh Hasina has been quoted in the UN and praised for doing that. One can say that she's been very responsible for that, for improving child health. Maternal mortality has actually come down over the last decade. And the reason for this is really interesting. It's because of girl education and empowerment, because that in general has increased. And I do see and find a political commitment to this. Antenatal care is important, and that's part of this whole process. Because if girls understand the need for nutrition, and births are not happening at such an early age as they were previously, combining that with a better family planning program, you get results. Of course, there's still a way to go. Child stunting in Bangladesh is 41%, and girls and women do get abused sometimes at delivery stage, and state-run health facilities could be improved a lot. So I don't want to portray a complete, good story.
Yeah.
There's always room for improvement, but the amount of progress that's been made in this whole health sphere, particularly with relation to women and children, these are things that can be counted and quantified. And this story does not get out, really. And I'm really surprised to find that. Really.
Yeah, that's fascinating, right? So I did a show earlier on women's literacy and educational development and improvement in health in developing countries with another mentor professor of mine from Harvard from years ago.
Yes.
And he's just done a book on literacy and women's education and how that's one of the key drivers of social development.
Yes.
And of course, Bangladesh would clearly fit into that category as a model society that's made huge strides in women's early education, primary level education, and secondary level education, which of course has positive sort of relations with health outcomes for kids, as well as for their educational outcomes in terms of schooling.
You can see that, up to a good age,
Yeah.
Girl education is completely free. Now that produces automatic results, and just in a couple of weeks' time, in early January, there's something like I've got the figure here, something like 270 million books are given out free to boys and girls, and an act has been enforced to prevent child marriage. Of course, it still happens, but at least the will is there, and as I said, this has been recognized in the UN as well. And the garment factory industry has been in the news recently, but there are 3 million women employed in that industry, and this really has a huge effect on women because it can it helps the economy. They become bread earners. They get a sense of confidence. And that again is transformational.
So it's an overall positive story. Now you found another, I think NGO, you said, non-governmental organization called Concern Worldwide.
I'm
and
so excited about
their project for pavement dwellers.
Project for pavement dwellers, Dinesh. Concern Worldwide runs a street project called Invest. So pavement dwellers are trained to cook and sell high-quality, delicious snacks. Now, these delicious snacks go under the brand name of Moja Khabar. My Bengali accent is really bad at the moment, but that basically means tasty snacks.
Right.
And just a few hours ago, I was out in Dhaka, and I was actually sampling these tasty snacks that a former pavement dweller had made. Now,
I'm jealous now.
I can tell you it was really delicious. When she was a pavement dweller, through actually scavenging, her name is Rahima, she was earning $17 a month, Dinesh. And now after this cooking and training, where they're taught about hygiene and entrepreneurship, essentially, she now earns $53 a month. And that's a huge amount of progress. And I saw her, she was all bubbly and everything. They work in pairs.
Well, on that hopeful and positive note, unfortunately, we're out of time. So I want to thank Rani Singh for joining us from Dhaka and giving us, live sort of updates on social development, political development, and geopolitical and cultural issues from Dhaka, Bangladesh. I want to thank my viewers for joining in the discussion. Tune in again next week for Asian Times TV. Thank you very much.